Have the Jets been naughty or nice? What will Santa leave them under the Christmas tree as we head into the new year? We'll talk about what the Jets might want on their wish list, whether it's a 2C, a defender, all of the above, all coming right up on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app, use promo code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your very first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Now, like I said, it is getting to be the holiday season. We have the Christmas break coming up this week. And with that break, obviously, the Jets are going to have a couple of days off, and maybe they've been writing a bit of a wanted list to Santa. Now, what exactly could the Jets be asking for, right? Obviously, Winnipeg is in a very good spot right now, but I think when you're considering it, Elliot Friedman has mentioned the Jets are actively looking for something, a little bit of a sweetener, maybe a stocking stuffer that just puts this team from good to like next level. And I wouldn't even say good, right? I would say the Jets are actually pretty great overall. So really it's kind of like finding something that pushes this team over the hump from, a team that's likely to have a deep playoff run to perhaps a cup favorite. So looking around the league, obviously there's quite a few teams that might be on the verge of potentially selling off some assets. And with the Jets, I think there's a couple of things that they're going to want, right? I think one big thing that would be a really big help is a second-line center. In the absence of Dubois and seemingly Bones not really wanting to play Perfetti down the middle, the Jets have generally relied on Nemesnikov and Lowry to split kind of the middle six center duties. And Lowry tends to be the one that I think tends to get more of the ice time. So, Adam, he's decent at what he does, and certainly as a more defensively minded center, he's been pretty solid throughout his career. But in terms of like high-end offensive production, maybe you are left wanting a little bit. So if the Jets want to perhaps upgrade down the middle, one name that I did mention earlier that would be of potential interest, thanks to some folks on Twitter pointing this out, is Casey Mittelstadt. I didn't realize at the time that Mittelstadt is actually expiring after this season, and he's also an RFA. As a 25-year-old RFA who's, been pretty good for much of his past two seasons, and honestly, I think has done better than a lot of people were expecting after the first couple of years where maybe, the hype got to him a little bit. This year, he's pretty close to a point per game. He's got 28 points in 34 games. He's been reasonably productive at both ends of the ice. He's defensively responsible. He'll track back. He maintains possession well. He passes well. He's a good playmaker. And for the Jets, if they were to pair Mittelstadt with, say, Kyle Connor and Cole Perfetti, you'd have a potentially monstrous second line, because I feel like right now the best thing to do is to keep Ehlers, Scheifele, and Vilardi together, even once Kyle Connor gets healthy. I know that that's not popular, but I'm telling you, if this line is dominating the way that it does, dominating at a level that even Ehlers, Connor, and Scheifele weren't together, you really would be remiss to split them up. Don't split up something just because you know that something else has been reasonably decent to even good at times. The top line, I think, is fine to stay. If the Jets get a second-line center, suddenly you have a little more room to work with. Now, the problem with Mittelstadt is that, obviously, he's not going to be cheap. 25-year-old guy who's coming off, what is looking to be like a career season, on pace for what, maybe a 60-ish point season, 65-point season. That's quite a bit, right? So the Jets are going to have to pay up. Now, I would say in the case of Mittelstadt, that's worth it, right? If Casey is putting up these numbers, just imagine what he could do with the Jets. Like, the Sabres are awful this year, but Mittelstadt's still doing really well. I think he could actually be a great upgrade over Nemesnikov. Not that Nemesnikov is bad. I think Vlad has done a really admirable job and has actually been pretty great for the Jets. But giving the Jets like a really good 1-2 punch in Scheifele and Casey would be honestly elite. And then you have Lowry and Nemesnikov in the bottom six, and you have so much more versatility with how you deploy your third and fourth line. So there's a lot of reasons to kind of like this sort of deal. I personally think it's a great option. Another guy that might be on the block, I don't know if he's even wanting to move, but it would be interesting to see what Claude Giroux might go for, especially if the Sens were to retain salary. Giroux is obviously not cheap. He's like $6.5 million in cap hit, but he is still one of their top producers. He's a veteran, savvy player, and he's got a year left after the season. Now, he's got a no-movement clause, but, I do wonder if he'd be willing to perhaps accept a trade to the Jets, especially with the notion that, this could be a much better situation to find yourself in than the dysfunctional Sens. Ottawa also has Jakob Chychrun, who has no trade protection or anything like that, no movement clauses, no movement clauses either. So, Chychrun, with only 2 seasons, currently on his deal at $4.5 million or so, would be a huge upgrade for Winnipeg's blue line, and maybe this is the time to get him. The Sens are going to have to sell. They're looking to probably blow things up. I think that could be a fantastic thing to find under your Christmas tree. But of course, the Jets might be looking for a lot of different things. I'll talk about why a second-line center might be the first priority rather than a scoring winger in just a little bit. But of course, the Jets are going to have plenty of options. They're going to have lots of teams to go to. And hey, maybe even Mikael Granlund could be an option if the Jets are really serious about finding that center. But before we get into second-line center business and why that might be more helpful than a winger, I did want to shout out our friends and partners at Sleeper. A new NHL season brings all sorts of possibilities. Ehlers could score 50 goals. The Jets could hoist the Stanley Cup. And you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. If you are a stats nerd who loves tracking save percentage, goals saved above average, plus minus, all the fun stuff, this is your time to track all of your favorite stars and win big. Whether it's McDavid, Crosby, McKinnon, Ehlers, Scheifele, Vasilevsky, Hellebuck, Makar, no matter who it is, you're going to have tons of sleeper projections to beat, and all you have to do is beat their projections either more or less in up to 8 different categories, and if you hit those 8 categories correctly, you could win 100 times your cash. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your very first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us in tonight's episode as we are diving into what is kind of on Winnipeg's wish list in terms of roster upgrades. We briefly talked about Casey Mittelstadt and why he could be a really big boost, and we even shouted out Claude Giroux. Obviously, these guys would be filling in as probably second-line centers, I think, for the Jets. That's, the most likely scenario. And, for various reasons, I could see at least Mittelstadt maybe being interested. He's from Minnesota. He's localish to the area, relatively speaking. So, in terms of coming up to Winnipeg, really wouldn't be that much of a jump from home. Now, he's not the only second-line center that's out there, and we'll talk about why I think this position is particularly helpful for the Jets. Before we go any further, though, just wanted to shout out something really cool that the Locked On Network has now started. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories from around the world with our local experts and our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Now, like I said, right, the Jets might be in the market for a second-line center, and the reason that I've really gone after this particular position is, quite honestly, the Jets' wing depth is pretty good. You've got guys playing center who are, capable of playing wing. So, Gustafsson can play out wide. You've got Kupari, who could probably play as a winger too. The Jets have lots of wide depth. Niederreiter, Appleton, all these guys who are capable of really pushing the pace in the bottom six. But where you maybe lack some elite talent is down the middle. It's not that Scheifele, Nemesnikov, Lowry, and Gustafsson or Kupari or whoever's on the fourth line is a bad center lineup. In fact, it's pretty decent. I think the biggest problem, though, is that the Jets, if you're really talking about contending against an elite team, say like Vegas or maybe even Dallas, right? You want to have that extra matchup ability down the middle, somebody who's a great distributor, somebody who can also kind of facilitate one of the two power play units. Because as it is right now, the Jets have a bit of a stagnant power play. We've heard Bones maybe try and shuffle some of the personnel units. I'm hoping that in tonight's Bruins game, we'll actually get a chance to see it. Obviously, we haven't had a chance to yet because in the last game, there were no penalties for the Jets awarded, so no power plays, which was really frustrating. But, instead we had to deal with 2 PKs. So for the Jets, I think obviously this is a really helpful thing. Obviously, Stastny was the really big under-the-radar kind of trade that the Jets made the last time when they were really going for it all. And then they brought in Kevin Hayes, and Kevin Hayes was actually really good, but unfortunately, Paul Maurice hated him, so it didn't matter. He ended up on the fourth line, didn't really get many minutes, and the Jets found themselves kind of wasting assets for a guy who, quite frankly, would have produced at a pretty elite rate for the Jets if he actually got the ice time. Was he soft on the puck? Sure. Was he maybe not as defensively responsible as you'd want? Sure. Is he a great scorer? Absolutely. And that's something that the Jets really could have used more of if they'd actually made use of what Hayes could bring. Now, Stastny, on the other hand, everyone loved him. The coaches loved him. The players and staff loved him. The fans loved him. He was elite for the Jets. And, it's a shame that his career with Winnipeg sort of ended on a bit of a sour note. But in terms of what he brought when he was, the first couple of seasons with the Jets, he was a player to die for. He was a great passer, had eyes in the back of his head. He was as good of a distributor as you could possibly ask for. So the Jets are probably not going to find somebody like that, if I'm being honest. A Paul Stastny, I just don't know is really out there. Where I could potentially see some interesting options is maybe looking at guys like, say, Yanni Gourde or Mikael Granlund. Maybe, in an alternate universe, Kevin Hayes, he is actually still out there. He's with the Blues. Obviously, he's not coming back, but it is kind of funny to imagine a time when he might have actually been a Jet again. But I think, for what Winnipeg wants, right? Obviously, the Jets have lots of assets to throw out there. Winnipeg's got tons of big draft picks to work with. And I think for what Winnipeg might be really interested in, for me, I kind of circle back to Mittelstadt because I feel like he is kind of the guy that you can extend longer term. When I look at a lot of the second line centers out there who might fit the Jets, I see a lot of rentals. And I feel like with what Winnipeg's timeline is, the Jets probably want something a little bit more concrete, something with a little more, I would say, asset control, right? Some genuine potential to stick around for a couple of seasons because Winnipeg's got a lot of prospects who are coming up in the system, some of whom can play center, but a lot of them who are probably more of the wide player variety. And with that kind of being the scenario, like Lambert and McGroarty probably playing as wingers, Barlow definitely a winger, I feel like the Jets could potentially spend a little bit in cap space and, extend somebody like Mittelstadt, for like a good 4, 5, 6 years. I would say more in like the 5-year range would be where I'd feel really comfortable. It takes him right to around age 30 or 31. And, if you give him a pretty healthy size contract, I feel like you'd actually get pretty good value out of it. He's been good for the last couple of years. He's a play driver. And compared to somebody like Mikael Granlund, right? Granlund is having a career season, relatively speaking, by his standards. But the thing with Granlund is like there's something about him where I feel like he is very creative down low and he's a great player. But in terms of his age and his likely contract control after this, right? He's only got one more season left, and I feel like the Jets would be better served kind of preparing not only for the next season, but for the seasons beyond. And that's where I think Mittelstadt would really be a nice bridge kind of player. He takes you from this core to the next. He'll be around when a lot of ELCs start to run out for some of Winnipeg's top prospects. And, potentially he could be a guy that the Jets really lean on heavily. Otherwise, you've got other options like Gord, who's got, a modified no trade clause. So I don't know if he'd really be interested in coming to Winnipeg, but maybe, I guess. I just feel like with the center depth that the Jets could probably bring in, the Jets have assets to genuinely pay up, and I feel like this is the position that would benefit Winnipeg the most. It's not like bringing in an elite winger like, say, Pavel Buchnevich would be bad. I think it would be awesome, and I would be all for it. I just also wonder if, given what the Jets need in terms of distribution down the middle and some of the vision and stuff that's kind of lacking in Winnipeg's current center rotation, this might be the best way to solve that. So, if the Jets can go out and get a second line center, whether it's Giroux or, somebody that I haven't even thought about, maybe Granlund, I don't know, maybe he's a guy that makes sense. Maybe Kyler Yamamoto if the Jets want to take a really risky chance. Even guys like, I don't know, Nate McLeod or Michael McLeod's been kind of decent for the New Jersey Devils. I mean, there's players who could fit the role. But I think for what the Jets want, right, it's time to really spend and go big, because I think at this point, just another like Niederreiter acquisition. I love Nino, I love Vlad, but I think you have to swing bigger, especially with, the likelihood that Winnipeg's window is really open for like the next couple of seasons while they have everyone under contract. So swing big, go for a home run, and then kind of go from there after that, because you've got basically 2 years to work with, and after that, things start to taper off. So we'll see what the Jets do. But of course, I do have some final wishes for 2024 that I'll go over in just a moment. These are just things that I kind of want to see, and we'll see what Winnipeg actually rewards us with in a few months here. But before we go any further, did want to shout out our friends and partners at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your vehicle alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has your back. With over 122 million parts for your number one vehicle, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay's Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and come away with a giant victory. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions to apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on these final thoughts in tonight's episode as we talk about some, higher level wishes for 2024. What do I hope the Jets come away with? What do I want to see them, give to us as gifts this year? Obviously, the upcoming calendar year is one with a lot of potential for the Jets. A big playoff run for the Jets this year would really bring a lot for Winnipeg. Obviously, the city has seen some attendance issues in the arena, and I think for the Jets, it'd be nice to get butts back in the seats, especially a lot of folks who are perhaps kind of on the borderline right now, right? They want to commit, but they weren't really expecting the Jets to maybe be this good this year, and the last several years have left a bit of a sour taste in their mouth. But this is a great time for Winnipeg to really offer good ticket packages, get the fan spirit back, and make Canada Life Center rollicking again. Because back in the days when it was still MTS, it was such a bastion of noise and excitement. And, the last few years, we haven't really seen that as much. But I feel like Jets fans are slowly coming back. A couple of games here where they've had some pretty good attendance figures. Not amazing, but enough to where it's like, okay, the Jets might be catching some eyes again. Also, having guys like Bedard and a few other superstars coming in certainly helps the attendance, so let's not forget that. But in terms of like the Jets home crowd, at least, it'd be nice if more folks were able to come out. And, the Jets have actually been doing, in my mind, a really good job of offering some relatively affordable ticket packages. I just saw one where they offered you 2 home tickets, 2 popcorn tickets, and I think a couple of skills competition tickets for like the All-Star stuff. For like $99 Canadian, which to me is like awesome. Like I couldn't imagine a better package deal that gives you, a couple of events and some in-game concessions. Really nice stuff. And we've seen more and more from Winnipeg like that recently. That makes me think, you know what? I think they've got the message. I think they're trying to do more fan-oriented stuff. And so far, it looks like it's relatively working. I'd be curious to know what the ticket sales are like with these packages, because I feel like as somebody who's used to having to pay really expensive fees, living in Baltimore for stuff like the Ravens and whatnot, the Jets ticket packages are actually really appealing. Otherwise, I think for Winnipeg, my biggest wish of all is to have a big, healthy playoff run. That, for me, is above all else the most important. I think a deep playoff run would also really be attractive to folks who maybe weren't thinking about signing long-term with the Jets, but might reconsider. We've already seen Nino reconsider. Scheifele and Hellebuck have extended. Now it's really time to woo Gabriel Velarde. I know he's signed for 2 years, but I promise you that next deal is going to be an absolute walloper, and the Jets better be ready to spend big, because I feel like he's going to have the numbers to back it up at the end of his contract. And based on how he's played, you know what? You better make that man a lifelong Jet. So long as he keeps it up. So far, so good, right? A very small sample size to work with, but he has been beautiful for this team. And if he keeps it up, I really see no reason why the Jets should not anoint him as one of their next big superstars. After that, I might ask for like a top puck moving D, but that's kind of like in the dream realm. I think a lot of us sort of understand where the Jets are at, and maybe the Jets find one internally. Heinola is going to be coming back from injury pretty soon. He's been skating in a no contact, which is about as good as you could possibly ask for, given how bad his injury was. If he is getting closer and closer to a return, might be time to shop the market and see if the Jets can offload some cap space and open up a potential roster spot for a big acquisition. I think the Jets have a lot of, blue line players that they could potentially offer up. And, with Winnipeg maybe being able to improve internally, add some more mobility on the back end and get more exciting, things are looking up for Winnipeg in a way that they have not looked up for in a while. And it's all kind of because of the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade. If ever there was one single gift that has given the Jets tenfold, that has probably been the one. So let me know what's on your Christmas wish list for the Jets. Drop them in the comments below or at my social medias, at HL Living Loco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. Thanks so much for listening and making us your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you back here next week for more Jets coverage, so don't go anywhere. Have a great night, and as always, go Jets, go.